Pucks with Haggs
is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 107th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, so thanks for tuning in for all these podcasts that we've done. With me today, longtime friend and colleague and frequent guest, Mick Colageo. Mick, thanks for joining us, and please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
First, I want to note that I think the Bruins had 107 points in the 72-73 season.
There you go.
They did win 50 games.
But they did not win the cup, unfortunately.
Hell no. They lost 5 to the Rangers, and they had home ice. It was a disaster. Right. Phil Esposito got hurt. Anyway, you can find me blah, blah about this and other things on my blog, Rink Wrap, which I link to X. I write a Sunday column for Boston Hockey Now, and I do appearances like this because Joe's so kind to have me.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you, Mick, and always a pleasure, my friend. I love the the listeners do too. Love the historical perspective you give on things and sort of the different perspective you have on all things Bruins, from being a fan for as long as you have and a writer and all the different hats that you've worn. So you are well appreciated here.
Lots of hats. Today's Cafe Martin hat.
That's right. Oh, that's a beautiful hat. I love to see the Cafe Martin hat. All right. We are entering, Mick, now that we are, close to, what's the date today we're doing this? Friday, July 12th. We are entering perilously close to the hockey dead zone. From about July 15th until about August 15th.
Swayman Standard Time.
Jack squat going on in the hockey world. Yes, there is. We're going to see like incredible Facebook posts about outlandish stuff that's clickbait, because those people are trying to make money in the absolute death valley of hockey news that's going to be going on for the next month or so. So the podcast will be going. We'll still continue to churn them out, and we'll find some fun stuff to talk about. But I think today we'll stick with the standard of what we've done in the past of talking about some of the news that's going on, a few things that are happening out there, and answer a few questions as well. The only thing of note today and the last couple of days really is Michael Callahan and Alec Regula, household names if there were ever a couple of them on the back end for the Providence Bruins. They got signed today to 1-year, two-way deals for $775K at the NHL level. Both I call depth defensemen. I don't think we're going to see them at the NHL level unless there are injuries. Regula, I think, probably has a bit of a better chance of Callahan of making a cameo or two now. But there's still, I think, other defensemen, Ian Mitchell being one of them, that are going to be in front of them as far as depth charts go.
Well, he's a right shot. He's a right shot, Mitchell. And I know that Regula and Callahan are not the same as far as which way they're holding the stick.
Right.
So that can affect things a little bit. Regula has really been he and Renouf were really a reliable pairing for the P Bruins. And
they were.
And I can't remember what Renouf's status is right now. And I can't pull up Cap Friendly today.
Else. Renouf is gone. He signed somewhere else. I saw that the other day. I forget who it was he signed with, but he's gone.
Okay. So, hey, Regula, he won't be a regular, but
he will in Providence.
Low-hanging fruit, Joe.
These are going to be stalwart guys for the Providence Bruins. As Mark Diver, I think, tweeted today, he mentioned something about how these are two of down the stretch maybe last year. These were two of Providence's best and most consistent defensemen, and I think that will be the case again this year for both these players. Michael Callahan being a local guy, Alec Regula came along with Ian Mitchell in trades that Don Sweeney made before last year to kind of shore up the defenseman depth and give him a couple of guys that have had some NHL experience. Yep. If there are injuries that are coming. So just any thoughts on this? This leaves only Mark McLaughlin and Jeremy Swayman as the only restricted free agents that are still yet to sign contracts. Everybody else has been taken care of at this point with these two deals coming down the pipe.
Yeah, we're at that point where Houston's about to lose contact with the ship. And we're going to have to sit and stare at the clouds for 3 minutes and hope it isn't 4 or 5 or 6 before we see the parachutes come through and and Swayman has a deal. So I'm not really worried about it, but I did think it'd probably be a fascinating article right now to talk about Bruins RFA goalie contracts through history, and that went into the dog days of summer without resolution, and what each, not only what each player got and when he was signed, but if the prolonged wait affected the play.
Yeah.
And I don't see any of that. I think that, they'll both be proclaiming a win. It'll be a win-win.
The only way that has any chance of happening, Mick, is if it spills into like training camp. If it starts to become real where they're missing real time. I mean, Swayman has been around Warrior. He was there at development camp multiple times, including being on the ice before one of the sessions. Like, I think he's doing what he normally does. I think and he's readying for the season as he normally would. Yeah. I feel like the only way this becomes a real problem is if it starts spilling and bleeding over into training camp and he starts missing real, practice time and real reps because there's any kind of holdup here. I don't foresee that happening, but I think that's the only way it would turn into like a negative impact on the season.
Well, it would, because then you got us making pains in the butts of ourselves to the coaches at training camp.
You would never do that. I would never do that.
Well, I would not sit back and let other people do it, but I know it's coming. If this thing somehow winds up there, I can't ever forget that Andrew Raycroft was the 2003-04 Rookie of the Year.
Yeah,
and he
and Nick Boynton. I remember that.
Nick Boynton, and he had bad lockout years. The 04-05, no NHL, the dark winter. They wound up doing, I think, Razor played in this awful league in Canada, which guys were scoring like 17 goals a game and nobody was defending. And then later in the season, he catches on with a team in the Finnish league, but he doesn't even get starter reps. So he has a very incomplete. Nick Boynton winds up playing in England. And they both come back, and because of the Bruins' botched lockout strategy, which Jeremy Jacobs has told me that we did what they told everybody to do. Right. It was not a maverick solution in his mind. It was what the league said everybody to do. But once they incorporated the player's offer of a 24% rollback into a cap, then the Red Wings and teams like that got to keep a lot of great players that it was supposed might wind up on the open market, and they didn't. And so the Bruins were suddenly like Super Bowl Sunday. You're in the grocery store at 6 p.m. and the shelves are bare. And you're trying to put together a hockey team. And you're hoping like hell that Brian Leetch still has something left, that Sean McEachran still has something left, that that you don't have Mike Knuble anymore. But you're hoping that was the guy who used to play for the Islanders that wound up replacing him and wearing number 21 briefly for them just that 1 year. I can always come up with this name, but now I can't. But you're hoping that these guys could be reasonable facsimiles, and you run through all of these different guys who have seen their best years, Alexei Zhamnov being among them. And you wind up having a season that actually was starting to, after the disaster start, the Thornton blockbuster, and now Patrice Bergeron is making his NHL debut, not until that trade at the center position. They actually started him, Sully started him out on the right wing again. Even though he had played that lockout year at center in the AHL. And so they were only like 2 points out of the playoffs at coming out of the Olympic break. And unfortunately for them, they start out in Carolina, and P.J. Axelson has a head-on collision with Aaron Ward, and it blows up Axelson's knee. And the whole team goes downhill after that. Next thing you know, the season's unraveling, and now Mike O'Connell gets fired in March. Why? Because in Harry's words, he did things that he ought not be doing when we kind of knew we were going to make a change. Okay, what was he doing? He was signing two players. He was extending two players, P.J. Axelson and Tim Thomas. So OC literally got fired for signing Tim Thomas.
Turned out to be a good signing.
I love the irony. So
Turned out to be a good thing.
So
Yeah.
he's the Dan Duquette of that championship. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, but I don't foresee this. Like, this is not the Harry Senden era. I do not foresee this turning into a Nick Boynton, Andrew Raycroft situation with their contracts, where it's going to become a problem, and Senden's going to tell somebody to start go yodeling instead of playing for the Bruins.
Take that, JJ.
I don't, he's going to tell him to go salmon fishing in Alaska, Swayman,
That's right.
instead of playing for the Bruins. Like, I don't see any of that happening. This is going to get done. And what we talked about, because the Swayman wants it to get done, he clearly wants to be a member of the Bruins. The Bruins want it to get done. I really think what's at play here, and I wrote about this, and we talked about it on the last podcast, Mick, and we can talk about it now again a little bit. I want to get your perspective on it. I think it's just the difference in numbers and what he's going to get paid right now. And I honestly think this is a tough one with Jeremy Swayman, because I'm sure he wants to get paid like he's one of the best goalies in the league. But I don't think you can pay him like that when he's never played more than 44 games in a season, and he's never even shouldered the full workload and proven that he can do it. When he wants to get paid, there's no comparables out there. The comparable that I looked at when I was looking at the other goalies was Saros, the deal that he's coming out of that he just signed.
Yeah.
It was the Saros 3 years, $15 million that he got when he was splitting time with Pekka Rinne.
Yeah.
That led to the deal he has now, the 7 years, $7.75 million, whatever it is, which that's, I think, the very, very high end of what Swayman would ever get in a million years, because he's got the Bruins over a barrel a little bit, because they traded Ullmark, because they don't have any other real alternative.
And they chose against arbitration.
Right. And look, they're going to be buying out a lot of his free agent years, so you can make an argument that you can pay him more than you probably should because you're buying out all these free agent years. But I still think it's going to be in the low sevens. Like, it shouldn't be even what Saros has. Saros has played over 60 games 3 years in a row. He's been, a stalwart workhorse guy that's put up big numbers, that's been a Vezina finalist and gotten heavy Vezina voting every single year. Ilya Shesterkin was another guy that I think was a comparable, but he as well playing 50-plus games a year, getting Vezina Trophy and Vezina votes, being a Vezina finalist. Connor Hellebuck, 2 Vezinas, workhorse, plays over 60 games a year, all this. All the other guys are not comparables to Jeremy Swayman, because they've all been established starters for a long period of time. And some of it's not his fault, because he was here with Ullmark. You get all that, but you can't say he's going to be capable of maintaining his performance for 60-plus games in an NHL season as a workhorse number one starter if he's never done it before. I really think he needs to go out and prove it. And maybe there's some way you can give him a 3-year, $18 million deal or something. That's
a dangerous game, because that ends in UFA.
It is. But you can't. But what happens? This is the other scenario, Mick. What happens if you give him 7 years, $7.5 million? You're paying him like one of the best goalies in the league, the top guys, the number one guys on every single
contract,
team. Yeah. And then he goes out, and in the first year, when he plays for 2 weeks in a row, all of a sudden you see the performance start to go down. You see mental and physical wear down effect as the year is going on, playing a lot more. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think he's built to be a number one goalie and a workhorse, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to pass those tests with flying colors, and he's going to prove his worth as far as all that goes.
Here's what I think. I think Swayman knows and is saying to the Bruins, it isn't that I think that. You think that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done what you did. You traded Ullmark.
Yeah, but
you put me in a position that just shows that you believe that this is the outcome, so pay me like it.
Let's also thank Game Time, your best place to get Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer. And actually they're winning some games, so you probably do want to get Red Sox tickets at Fenway summer. Although, for me, I might use Game Time, for I saw yesterday that Journey and Def Leppard and Heart are going to be playing at Fenway Park in August. So I may use Game Time to go see that threesome, because I went and I saw Poison, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, and Joan Jett last year at Fenway, or it was 2 years ago. I can't remember. That was like one of the all-time great concerts. Def Leppard was unbelievable. I would definitely go. I mowed a lot of lawns in middle school with the Walkman playing Def Leppard in my ears, Evan, back in the day. Young Joe Haggerty was like 12, 11 years old. Game Time is a great place to get tickets for concerts, baseball, all that stuff right now. Seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Zone deals, you save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. This is just good stuff. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account, download the app, and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, but that's not how contracts work, though. You can't just say, look, you traded Ullmark, so now you have to give me this because you believe in me. Like, that's not how it works. You have to – the agent for the player has to show contracts that are comparable to say, this guy has the same numbers as this guy. He needs to get paid like that guy. And there are no comparables that have Swayman's numbers that are going to be making $7 or $8 million a year. That's where the problem comes in, is in the actual, negotiating of a contract between an agent and a GM. There are zero comparables to Jeremy Swayman that are getting paid $7 or $8 million a year on a $7 or $8 million a year deal. There just aren't. So, I think this is why nothing's happening, because I think they're in a real difficult spot where the Swayman's camp wants to get paid like Shesterkin and Hellebuck and Saros. And I'm sure the Bruins are like, we'd love to pay you that kind of money, but, you haven't earned it yet. You're not there yet as a goalie with what you've done in your career. And it does open up a problem.
It's a plastic argument. It's a tough one because they're contradicting it. I'm not disagreeing with you from a historical perspective. That is how it goes. I get it.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys make most of their money after they've played their best whatever, and that's sports is right. And I think that other teams do go outside the box and they do bold moves that are based on beliefs that this is what we have and this is what we want and this is what we think we're going to do and we want them here for a very long time. I think it would really be antithetical to go with something, try to do some sort of a bold, like a high-end bridge contract. I think would really be something that the Swayman camp would kind of like, get out of here with that crap. Let's do this and say, I'm your guy. I've proven it in the playoffs, and let's go. Everybody needs a credible backup now. Didn't he play not like 2 or 3 years ago? Didn't he play more games than he played any of these last couple of seasons?
No. This past year was the most he's played, 44.
44, okay. So it's slightly more.
It's not even close to 60. It's not even like 50. He did have a good playoff, but that's a month. That's probably was even less than a month.
It was 2 series, and 2 tough series, and
that helps you. That helped him. That helped them decide to trade Ullmark and give him the job of number one goalie. There's no question he's going to be the number one goalie.
It's just hypocritical to hedge their bets on with a contract after making the personnel decision that puts them there. That's all I'm saying, and that's what I expect is the Swayman camp's argument about why he should be paid like the top guys.
Right, but you can't. I don't. In a world of negotiation and the way it works, it's just like real estate. You have to find comparable properties, and that's how you get the value of a property. That's just how it goes. That's the way the game is played. That's how every single one of them. You can make the argument, I guess, that if you're selling to a relative, you're going to sell for less money, or you could give a sweetheart deal or.
I think if Swayman has to settle for a bridge contract and takes fewer years 3 years, because he doesn't want to settle for that salary on 7 years, for instance, I think he'll leave.
I don't think he would, but I don't think it's going to get that far either. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to go down that road because they don't want to. I think take the risk that he's just lights out for 3 years and that turns into they're paying him $10 million a year or whatever, 3 years from now. But I do think it's going to cause him to probably get less than everybody thinks.
Well, I do agree with that part, because I heard a lot of 8 times 8.
8 years.
8 times 8.
Everybody thinks he's going to get 8 years, $64 million. He is not going to get 8 years.
No, that ain't going to happen, because I think
it's going to be much closer to 8 years, $56 million.
What I feel like I've learned over these last few years, every time there's been mass panic over the Bruins cap situation, and they're not going to be able to fit these guys in, they're not going to be able to do this, it always works out. They always do what they want to do. The Zamboni.
Well, and they're also willing to spend money. They're willing to spend money for the players.
Yeah.
They spend to the cap, like the era, like what you're talking about, when they were coming out of the lockout, and it was a disaster when they didn't re-sign Knubel, they didn't re-sign Ralston, they didn't re-sign Sergei Gonchar, they didn't re-sign Nylander, all those players they had that they loaded up on right before that year-long lockout.
And Marty LaPointe go. He had one more year left, but it was the lockout year, and they let that expire.
But those times are over. Like that's not been the case for the Bruins in a long time, where they've spent to less than the cap. They always spend to the cap. Now it does usually work out, and they've been really good at it. Like it didn't work out this past year. They had to pay the piper, though. Obviously, with all the the JVR, Kevin Shattenkirk, those kind of contracts they had to bring in, trading Taylor Hall, like that whole thing. But they certainly have the cap space to sign Swayman, and I think they're going to sign Swayman. I just think it's kind of irresponsible, and it's kind of not reading the landscape to just say it's 8 years, 64. Pay him his money, he's earned it. No, he hasn't. He's going to get paid less than.
Well, the body of work, of work doesn't dictate 8 times 8.
No, it's going to probably be 7 max, or somewhere in the low 7s or high 6s, because there's nobody that's making.
And who knows? Maybe they've already got an agreement in principle, and they're just trying to decide how much they're going to front load. When's the CBA coming up?
Doesn't feel like that, though, does it?
It never does. It always feels like there's a strain until it happens. Until it's done, it feels like it might not happen. But that doesn't mean.
Yeah.
But history tells me that this is nothing for Bruins fans to stress over.
No, I agree. I think it's going to get done. It's more explaining what the holdup is. I think the holdup is that Swayman's in a very unique position, given what he's done to date and given what he probably wants for money, where it's just not. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's not lining up, where he's probably going to get a little bit less than he wants to get or thinks he's earned at this point.
He's never played a full regular season and playoffs as the number 1 goalie.
Correct.
Hasn't done it.
And you can be
that basic and be right.
Well, and it's the games played plus being one of the best, which vis-a-vis being a Vezina Trophy finalist, being in the top 5 of Vezina Trophy voting, that kind of thing is
which
something
the
else
NHL should take seriously, because the GMs vote on the Vezina.
They do.
It's not like us schmucks. I mean, I'm sure if they don't give a crap about what the PHWA does,
Yeah. But, I think it's all awards voting, though. I think that comes into play with the negotiations, too. Showing that you were a dominant player during the season.
Yeah, I mean,
for long stretches of time where, like I said, Shesterkin, Hellebuck, Saros, all of them either won Vezina trophies, were Vezina Trophy finalists, or were multiple seasons where they were top 5 in the Vezina Trophy voting. Jeremy Swayman this past year just popped on the Vezina Trophy voting for the first time, and he finished 7th.
Yeah.
So he's still on the lower end of building that resume to get paid he's one of those other guys.
7th is pretty damn good when you consider the fact that it was a 50-50 split.
Oh, yeah. Well, it makes it even more amazing that Ullmark won the Vezina the year before.
Because the GMs are saying that about him against the reigning Vezina Trophy winner in a year that they went 50-50. And it wasn't the protected 50-50 that it was the year before. And I know the playoffs don't count. But that's something else the Swayman camp can bring along and say, and he took over the net, and he did it with aplomb. So
yes, he did. Had everybody chanting Swayman in the handshake lines at the end of the Florida series.
That's incredible. I mean, it was so much about, this is their goalie, this is their guy. He pretty much, he pretty much owns the city about as much as is possible for a guy who lost in the second round of the playoffs.
Yes,
it was really something.
Well, the Bruins fans in the city of Boston loves their goaltenders. There's no question about that.
Well, they hate them.
Like
it's passionate.
They usually love them.
They usually do love them, and I will agree and I will also concede this. I always liked Tuukka.
Yeah,
and I felt like he got a bad rap from some people because of things that happened at the end of those seasons when.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know. It seemed to always happen at the end of those seasons, though, didn't it?
Well, that's the problem. You're at the scene of the crime.
Perhaps a little more.
You're holding the bag.
Perhaps
people think you're guilty.
At a certain point, it becomes more than coincidence. That's what I feel like.
Well, if that's it becomes legacy. I know what you're saying. Becomes legacy.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean,
and he never won the big
one.
Yeah. That's the other thing that you get. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a finer goaltending performance than his Eastern Conference final against Pittsburgh in 2013. That was unbelievable what he did against the Penguins.
The whole postseason in 2019, Mick, he was unbelievable too.
Well, he was. I mean, the numbers kind of fell off in the and they didn't get the big saves that Tuukka normally would make in the final, but I feel like he was that was a byproduct of what happened between the nets.
Yeah, and he wasn't great in Game 7, I thought, against St. Louis.
No, I mean,
which was problematic.
Kind of like that first goal by the Blues was very much like the first goal on Luongo in 11. It was kind of like this puck was supposed to go to Mark Recchi, and Bergeron sees it sitting there and fires it inside the post, and people are like, huh? What? It's 1-0? And next thing you know, a Marchand wraparound.
Yep.
And Berge on his knees. And the penalty kill.
The roof caves in.
And the roof caves in.
So this is a tweet from Larry Joe East. Jeremy Swayman, hope I'm not bothering you, Joe. Can you tell us your view on the Swayman contract? I would have thought he would have been signed before the Ullmark deal. Thanks.
That should have been the show open.
Well, I'm just reading. I'm going to read Larry Joe East because I was going to read that before we talked about Swayman, but we just flowed right into it anyway. So Larry Joe East, good question. I hope you
enjoyed the answer.
Got your fill. You got your fill of your our Swayman thoughts, and in a perfect world, they would have done the Swayman contract before they traded Linus Ullmark. They would have been in much better bargaining and negotiating position if they had done it before they traded Linus Ullmark. And if they really this tells me if they really wanted to be hard asses about it and hardcore about it, they probably wouldn't have traded Ullmark, and they would have kept him in the fold and waited until the very last minute to trade him, and sign Swayman to try to keep leverage.
Don Sweeney said that he would prefer to keep both goalies, and I think that the Zadorov acquisition speaks to this. I think that these are linked. I think that this is. I felt pretty off guard when the Zadorov signing. I know there was some rumbles, but I wasn't really taking him too seriously because there are always rumbles in the sky, but the rain isn't necessarily going to fall. But when you see that Mason Lohrei had such a great playoff, that kind of says, I'm not looking back. And it looked like it just screamed to me that, the Bruins have a guy here that they're probably going to play with McAvoy next season. Well, I suppose that's still possible if they want to go with a hyper-balanced, where nobody gets too overly taxed kind of a situation. That could happen. But let's face it, this is a pairing. This pairing is geared toward Charlie McAvoy. Why? Because they want to make sure that they have two pairings that they feel really good about defensively in the new goaltending era.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's definitely part of it. And I think it's also because they want McAvoy to feel like he has to do less. They want the pounding to stop on him physically. They don't want him to stop wearing down in the postseason because he has to do so many things. They probably want him to focus a little bit more on being an offensive factor and less having to be the guy that's always throwing the tone-setting hit or the momentum-shifting hit. And
it doesn't have to be Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer. Just focus.
Exactly.
Just kind of more focus on the Niedermayer end of it. If there's a big hit there, sure, make it. But it seems like there were certain games where the opponents could goad him into being preoccupied with the next hit that he's going to take or make.
Yeah, he could chase things instead of like just playing his game.
Yeah, right. And trying to do, there's too much. Trying to do too much. A lot of great players. I remember Ray Bourque during the 91-92 season. He had played a ton of hockey as the Bruins had gone to 2 Stanley Cup finals, 2 other conference finals. He had played a boatload of hockey, and he was playing with the minutes he was playing. And then in 91-92, they're going through labor war, and the Bruins lineup is changing quite a bit. And, everybody who was like the player rep was getting gassed, and there's like the team was getting weaker and weaker, and Gary Galley's gone. And so they're asking more of Bourque in his situation. And he's going through that season and it's going through a lot of players. A ton of players played for them that year. And Ray Bourque tried to do too much that year. And it wasn't until it really kind of bottomed out. And a couple of bad losses one of them was against the Red Wings for sure at the Garden. And that they all kind of like had to like say, okay, let's all take a breath here and settle down. And then obviously they became a much better team with the injection of late season Olympic players and Glenn Murray simultaneously.
That was right in my wheelhouse of being a Bruins fan, was those years when they started bringing in the college kids. Yeah. For the playoff runs and the late season stuff. I remember those. Like
Joe Juneau from Team Canada, Ryan.
Teddy Donato was one of those kids.
Teddy Donato
Hines
and
was one of those
Stevie.
too, right?
That's right. Hines and Donato. They were like salt and pepper. Yep. They came together on the table. And Glenn Murray was brought up from junior at the same time, even though he was a very primitive version of himself. He didn't have his NHL stride yet, but he could sure shoot the puck.
Now with Major League Baseball in full swing, with the Boston Red Sox actually doing okay, sort of fighting for a playoff spot, certainly better than I think anybody would have expected going into this season. Now's a great time to use Prize Picks. If you're a Red Sox fan and if you're a baseball fan, with basketball and hockey having wrapped up, Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. I mean, where can you go wrong? You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every single week, from lowering select players' stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. All kinds of good stuff going on right there. Prize Picks is also available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So if you want to get on board the Jarren Duran train with the Boston Red Sox and start loading up on his stats, Tristan Casas, when he comes back and starts hitting, all the Red Sox, if you want to get on board with them, just get it done with Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So, all right, here's another tweet. Still fascinating to me that Fabian Lysell, rated as the number 2 prospect and has been at points number 1, has he still yet to play an NHL game for the Bruins. Understand the injuries, but any insight on where the team views him currently, from Flobo Dan. And we talked a little bit with Mark Diver about the last podcast about Lysell, about several Providence players. Mark McLaughlin, there was a question about him as well. And I mean, I think the consensus here is that he's going to get looks this year. He's going to get looks with Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand. He's going to be part of that sort of by committee carousel of right wings that they're probably going to try in the top 6. Yeah. And I'm sure there's probably going to be a training camp invite or two, a la Danton Heinen, for that spot as well. Guys that don't have jobs that they can bring into camp, and maybe somebody flashes and earns a job that way as well. But, like, you know, Max Jones will get looks there. Trent Frederick will get looks there. Morgan Geekie will get looks there. There's a bunch of players that they're going to try out.
Equipped himself as the plumber centering the second line. That to me, you know, in the postseason for the heavy hockey, that to me tells me that he's going to be getting definitely get some of those looks. But Lysell would really, if he has a good camp, he'll definitely get his shot at that, because he made a big leap this past season, and was, second or third in P. Bruins scoring most of the year. He took that horrible hit.
He's still very young for AHL standards, Mick, at 21, 20 years old, whatever he is. Like, he's still a very young player for that league.
And I think they like the fact that he's got a little bit of confrontational yappage in his game. He enjoys getting into it with opponents. He's got a very fiery personality, so he's fun. And I think that, that kind of can translate into a competitive style. So I look forward to seeing if his game, at this stage has any ability to translate to the NHL. I tend to think that, that he's got really incredible talent, but the Bruins have a thing now, and I felt this way about the draft, that you can go one of two ways when you pick late. You can say, okay, then I'm going to go for a third liner. I'm going to go for a number 4 defenseman. I'm going to go for a guy that I see a guy, right. Perfect example. We see him as they drafted him thinking someday he'll be our third line center. They want a guy who could be, who could exude the properties that kind of player ideally has and brings to the team chemistry. What the Bruins have done instead in this particular draft, starting with Dean Letourneau, is try to identify diamonds in the rough. And by doing that, they're getting people who did not play in the showcase level appropriate for their age. So in the case of Letourneau, they got a guy here who wanted to play in the OHL his whole life, got drafted too far down to think he had a realistic chance of making a team, and decided instead to go the college route. And it was going to be Northeastern. It winds up BC. With Will Smith turning pro, they have a slot. So he's going to go there, and we'll see how he does. And at the same time, these other guys that you've seen in this draft are from these tier 2 sort of junior leagues. I think there was one that was similar to the Ivan 20 years ago when they got Ivan Hummel, terrific talent, but they got him from the second level. He wasn't major junior. He was playing the one notch down, but they felt like this kid's got it. And he did. He just didn't. I think he liked the pregame warmups and the crowd interaction too much. And it didn't really understand what the job required. And he'd never really fully developed into what I think he could have been, which is a really terrific NHL player. But I think the Bruins are trying to identify guys like that they think that can punch above the weight of where Central Scouting would have had them because of where they are hiding, because of family personal circumstances, whatever wrong along the way, whatever didn't happen, late bloomers, whatever. It's a risky kind of a way, because you could wind up striking out all the way across the board. But if you hit bigger. And that's what this draft legacy will be.
Yeah, for sure that pick, the Letourneau pick, no doubt, will be that. I think it's easier to take a risk on a player like that when he's 6'7" and he's got great offensive skills. There were some things about him that I think you looked at and said, okay, we can take a risk on this kid because the physical tools are impressive, and he's going to a great program in Boston College. We're talking about a player that, has got legit credentials, even though he was playing in a not quite as high a level as competition as most of these other kids.
So he's going to need more. He's going to need more development. It's going to translate to more development. You can see that. Even though he's saying 1 or 2 years at BC and I'll be ready to make Boston, I'm like, dream on, buddy.
Yeah, no. That's what. Yeah, when I saw him say that at the draft, I was like, no way.
Cringeworthy.
That was even before seeing him at development camp. It was just further cemented when I watched him at development camp, and he was physically not able to, handle the strong guys that were 5 years old or 6 years older than him. and was like, was giving up on drills too. Was like before the whistle would blow, just like giving up on a drill and skating away, and the other kid, finishes off the drill, finishes off the play. And I was looking like, what was going on there? Like, you can't do that at the professional level. Like, that's not even something I want to see on my Pee Wee team.
Where's Johnny Whitesides when you need him?
Seriously.
Welcome to the prospects camp, and I don't care if you were drafted or if you were drafted 172.
But that's kind of, I think, the knock on him a little bit is that there's a little bit of a lack of compete at times where he disappears at times in games. And some of that can be you're 6'7", you're not the fastest guy in the world. Like
the optics are going to be less kind in a situation like that.
Yeah, and everybody's always going to be watching you because you're that big, and it's going to seem like at times you're not sort of moving or not,
right,
giving full effort or whatever. Like, and it's going to be tough. But like you could see in development camp, there were times where he didn't seem as competitive in some of the shifts and some of the drills as you kind of need to be. And some of that is being 18 years old.
Yeah, some of that's a learning curve as well.
It is, of course. But like you also have to wonder how much of that is his DNA as a hockey player and how much of that is going to continue.
We'll find out now because he's going to be in the spotlight here, No,
totally. But like that's kind of like what you come away from that like short viewing of. I saw some things I really liked. He can shoot the puck great. Like people were telling me he's not Tage Thompson, and that's not a great comparable because he doesn't shoot the puck the same way. I thought him shooting the puck was one of the best things he did the entire week when he was at development camp. I thought his ability to pick pucks up and really rocket them quickly, like the hands going from collecting the puck to shooting it, his actual shot, his ability to create shots around the net, like all that stuff I thought was really, really good. And he had a really powerful like cannon shot. Like that stuff is going to be a weapon for him.
It seems like the classic prospect it's classic prospect that long after he's forgotten because he'll no longer be he'll be exceeded by shinier, newer toys and get forgotten about, but he's still developing those years, and then he's going to emerge later. That's the outcome the Bruins are hoping for. A little like they're getting they're getting Justin Brazeau now. What were people thinking about him in Toronto 2 years ago? I don't know.
Right. Like he's the kind of guy that, to your point, like 21 years old, he might all of a sudden have a massive year at BC and like really be everybody's radar and like, oh, okay, this is what they picked. But also, like you were mentioning, I think it's going to be like more like 3 years at Boston College based on what I saw at development camp. I think this coming year is probably going to be like growing pains, not a ton of offensive production, not playing high in the lineup. Like maybe he doesn't play every single game. Like I think it's going to be one of those years for him as he transitions into like big time Division I college hockey and Hockey East, and he gets better progressively as it's going along. But I think if you have like mile high, sky high expectations for him going into Boston College, based on what I saw at Dev Camp, I think it's going to take him a little while.
It might be very Joe Thornton-ish, as far as like when he came into the NHL at age 18, there was really no recourse. Sending him back was not an option. And legally it was, but rules-wise they could have, but it was a bit of a terrible idea. Better to just try to protect him and the perfect coach to do it. Sometimes people say, well, it took Keenan to bring out the best in Joe Thornton. He was the right guy at the right time, but he would have been a disaster at the beginning. Pat Burns was the right guy at that time.
Most definitely. But like getting back to what we were like initially, we were talking about Lysell before we went down to the Dean Letourneau rabbit hole. Lysell is a guy that I think is going to get looks this year. I think it's a big year for him. He's going to get legit NHL playing time, but it's on him. Like he's got to be the guy that comes into training camp ready to go, ready to impress, ready to show that he wants to do it. He's got to be the guy that's got to prove it to guys like Brad Marchand that he's worthy of skating on the same line as him, and he's worthy of that top 6 spot that they're probably going to like give him sometimes. Like he's going to have to prove to those players, Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand, that he can play with them and that he should be playing with them. And that's going to be a big part of it too, if he's going to stay there, is Marchand going to Jim Montgomery and saying, hey, I like this kid, keep him playing with us. Like that's what happens in these situations. Like when it's a veteran player and it's 2 veteran players, the coach is going to them and saying, hey, who do you guys really want to play with? just as much as it's Jim Montgomery evaluating and say, this is the guy that should play with them. Like, it's going to be a back and forth kind of decision, and there's going to be a lot of collaboration between all parties involved. So, like, that's something that a guy like Fabian Lysell needs to understand, is like, he needs to do the right things because the veterans are going to be watching, and they're ultimately going to have a lot of say into what he does and where he plays and how long he gets an audition there. Because we've seen, and I've mentioned this a few times before, poor Brett Conley, when he came in and tried to play with Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand, like, it was an absolute disaster. And, like, you could tell by the end of the time he was playing with them, they were kind of like, you got to find this somebody else. This isn't working. It just was not gelling, even though Peter Chiarelli and the Bruins really wanted it to work. It just wasn't happening.
No. And I think that a guy like Connolly, because of his draft pedigree, he was going to, in his size, he was going to get a lot of chances. And he was better play with the Capitals afterwards than he was with the Bruins when they had him. But
more of like a third line kind of role.
Yeah. He just kind of like the expectations were lower. It was more cup half full. And, I just think there was a lot of pressure there when you're making a cap move and moving a player as popular as Johnny Boychuk. And this is what you're getting back. Ultimately this is what that was all about. And you're saying, okay, well, if this guy pans out, well, is he panning out? No, he didn't pan out. So that was a tough one. It was probably very causative to them missing the playoffs. And having the kind of season where missing the playoffs became an 11th hour, fate. So, Lysell, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got. But I think that on his side, it's good for him because every good thing he does is going to translate. It's going to be money in the bank for him to get more chances because that's the way they want the traffic to go. There's nothing more the Bruins would like than to see that draft pick pan out. And
absolutely.
And so
we saw it this past year, Mick, with Johnny Beecher and Mason Lowry.
Yeah.
And those kind of guys grasping hold of jobs. Like, they want those kids and Matt Poitras. Yeah. They want those kids to seize the job and seize the opportunity and say, I'm so good that you have to pass up the veteran that you tried to put in my place. And, you're going to give me that job because I'm going to earn it. Like, they want that. They totally want that.
That's the outcome they want. And even if you don't get it right away in the season, Brazo's comes up later. There's just things that happen that were Providence related that didn't happen right away. And it turned out to be a good thing for them, and then we never talk about Merkulov because of those four games? It was four regrettable games. He played fourth line and he got sent back, and it was just really just a kind of like a why did you bother kind of a thing. And and so, who knows?
His one shining moment was hitting a post.
Right. So maybe that situation isn't the last time we're going to hear about that.
Oh, of course.
So that's
Merkulov is definitely in that mix too, Mick. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Like, he's going to get looks too. I think there's a handful at least, and perhaps more, if they bring in a veteran camp tryout or two.
Yeah, that second line right wing spot has got a lot of interest right now. And then that the chemistry and the how, which, where, when, you might agree on which 8 guys are going to get the bottom 6 spots, but you might not see a fruition of the form of it until we've had some time. So, and the defense is, and the goaltending is pretty much already decided pending performance.
Yep.
Korpisalo, Bob Essens is one of the great goalie whisperers of our era. And Korpisalo is probably going to be a great backup for Swayman. So.
Yep. No. And that stuff is established. And I still think too, what we're probably going to see is at the trade deadline, they're going to bring in some kind of winger to fill that spot when it comes down, to it. If they're like in a position, it looks like they're going to be, Stanley Cup contenders, which everybody thinks they're going to be, based on last year and based on the ads that they have. I think that's their number one target at the deadline, barring injuries, is or some crazy, performance going sideways that we don't see is a top 6 winger that can put the puck in the net.
Joe Murray had me on the other night on the Sports Hub, and he said that the Athletic came out with a thing about how everybody gave everybody a grade or stacked the teams in order of who did better in the summer, and they had the Bruins at 26.
Of course they did. That's something the Athletic does not like the Bruins. There is something going on there because, it was stupid that they ranked their draft and development pipeline as 30th, and then Mason Lowry, Johnny Beecher, Matt Patra all became contributing members on that team last year. Brazeau, other players came up. Yeah. It showed you how
and you can even count Witherspoon in that. Yeah.
Yeah, the rankings are not even worth the words that they're put on, and it's not worth the time to read the articles because these draft gurus or prospect gurus, they don't really know. I think they are all, it's like a group think where they're all basically saying the same things about the same players. Where anybody that would have watched Mason Lowry play would have said that kid's going to be an NHL defenseman. He's good. Yeah,
I think part of the problem too is that they tend to think in aggregate terms. You lose DeBrusque, you lose this many goals. You lose this guy, you lose this stat, you lose that. You say, then where are you going to get this? This isn't baseball. It isn't even basketball. And, you put a guy who is as dominant a player, 3 zones, whichever team has the puck, no matter where it is on the ice, Elias Lindholm's going to be one of the 3 best players on the ice. So that's 20 minutes a game from Charlie Coyle, and you now go to 40, where you have more of a Bergeron Krejci presence back on your team. And this isn't even the foundation for your cup contention anymore. It's your defense, which I thought they were going to go into with that big 3+ Lowry, and instead of going in with a big 4. And they're getting Zadorov at the same stage of his career and age that Chara was when they got him. So is he Chara? Of course not. And he doesn't want to be called Big Z because, out of respect. Right. And God bless him for that. He's already endearing himself to me. So, but if the Bruins are right about Zadorov and about him being less Radko and being more measured and mature in his approach, then they've put their team in such a better. Hampus Lindholm's job just got so much easier. He's going to be so much better this year, not having to face the guys that he had to face because Zadorov's going to face them. And this is where the put it on. Things are going to fall down here, and there's going to be succession, and there's going to be a lot of support and help, and more guys are going to score more goals because they're going to be a better hockey team is playing more of the game in the opponent's end as a result of the Lindholm acquisition. This is huge.
See, I am of the opinion that it's okay if he's still got a little Radko going on, and I think the Bruins need that. So I'm fine if he still has a little bit of Radko in his game. But I think people are sleeping on how important the Zadorov signing is and how much of an impact it's going to have. I think it's going to have a very big impact on this team, especially come playoff time when you need somebody like that is just an absolute enforcer in the D zone among your defensemen. And it just puts fear into the other team going around the net and when they're carrying the puck into the offensive zone.
I was so taken aback by the Zadorov signing that my first thought was, I wonder if they're reevaluating their commitment to Hampus Lindholm. I still don't think they are. And that maybe at the deadline, if Lowry's playing really well, that they would reconsider this whole thing and maybe cash in for a high-end forward to score.
I say no only because if you look at Zadorov, he's never really averaged even 20 minutes a game in his career. He's never been a true, really sort of super workhorse, all-situation, top 4 defenseman. And I just don't – and Lindholm is that and has always been that. And I just think they're stockpiling D and making themselves bigger. The smallest D now on that D core, Mick, is Charlie McAvoy at 6'1", 209 pounds. That's crazy when you think about it that everybody else is bigger than that.
That's right.
But that's how you win in the playoffs, and that's what you need to win.
If they can skate, and this group can skate.
Well, yeah, of course. Mick, thanks for joining us, my friend. Let's do this again next week.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.